Sorry to interrupt.
So I'm going to use, again, I grabbed 4 of those questions for this assessment. So I'm going to read you a story that's called Old Henry. And basically I do this as a read aloud. Students are sitting at their desks in front of me, however I do read aloud, and they have what you have in front of you. 4 pieces, a paper with 4 squares. And again, that is labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when I stop and have them jot, I'm having them jot in a particular square. So everybody's answering in the same square, the same question, if that makes sense. All right, so I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen so they can see the book. All right. All right, so by now everybody should have one last time a blank piece of paper that's folded in half, and then again, so you have 4 squares. Label your squares 1, 2, 3, 4. So I am reading the book Old Henry.
And we want to make sure everybody has a group, right? Everybody's together with a group, I guess.
They can make sure that after also.
Yeah.
All right. And this book is by Joan W. Bloss, illustrated by Stephen Gammell. Old Henry. The story begins when a stranger appears and moves into a house that was vacant for years. Right. Let me just switch so you guys can see better here as I'm holding the text. All right. No one thought he meant to stay. The house was drafty, dark and gray, and more than 7 years had passed since anyone had lived there last. He meant to stay, he had no doubt. It suited him from the inside out. And in its vast and dusty spaces, all the things he had found places. That Henry. The neighbors watched him moving in and promised each other he'd soon begin to fix things up a bit. He did not think of that. With money enough to pay the rent, his books, birds, and cooking pots, he was content and never did notice, or else didn't care, that people whispered everywhere, "That place is a disgust." At least, they remarked, you would think he could show a little respect for the neighborhood. That place is a disgrace. At last they decided to form a committee and went to him saying, "We are proud of our city. If you'd only help out, think how good it would look." "Excuse me," he bowed and went back to his book. So in that first square where you have number 1, I want you to jot, what kind of person is Henry? And what makes you think that? So again, in that first square, you're going to write, what kind of person is Henry? What makes you think that? Okay, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds to finish up. Okay, I'm going to keep going on now reading. Then they fined him fines. They threatened jail. They wrote him long letters and sent them by mail. Dear Henry. still, the hollyhocks wilted, unwatered, unkept. The gatepost stayed crooked, the walk stayed unswept. And things went on as they'd begun, and he angered his neighbors one by one. Can't we make him sweep the walls? No, there's nothing we can do. You nasty Polly, shoo, shoo, bird, shoo. So unfriendly. He never talks. One day in November, they sought the advice of the mayor, who suggested being nice. Being nice? Please try it twice. But when two of the ladies baked him a pie, he said, I'm not hungry. No, thank you. Goodbye. And when three of the men said they'd shovel his snow, he quickly said, no. We told you so. Now Henry too had had his fill. That night he grumbled, I never will live like the rest of them, neat and the same. I am sorry I came. So now in box number 2, I want you to jot, what do you think will happen next? What makes you think this? So again, in square number 2, you're going to jot your answer to what do you think will happen next and what makes you think this? Okay, about 5 more seconds, finish up. All right, I'm going to continue reading. Then he packed some things in shopping bags and tied the rest in three old rags. He didn't make plans. He just left a short note, hastily written, gone to Dakota. He taped it to the big front door, and no one lived there anymore. His daylilies bloomed, his flocks grew tall. They picked his apples in the fall. They picked his apples, and now and then someone would ask, remember when? Remember when? Remember when? Later still in winter snow, they asked one another, where did he go? Will he come again? His house looks so empty, so dark in the night, and having him gone doesn't make us more right. That Henry. Maybe some other time would get along, not thinking that somebody has to be wrong. And we don't have to make such a terrible fuss because everyone isn't exactly like us. Meanwhile, old Henry, to his great surprise, was missing the neighbors who'd brought him some pies. In spite of the nagging, he really did care for them and for their street. So he wrote to the mayor. Dear Mayor, I am finding it hard to be far from my house and my tree in my yard. If I mended the gate and I shoveled the snow, would they not scold my birds? Could I let my grass grow? Please write and tell me the answers so then we can all get together. Sincerely yours, Henry. So now in box 3, I want you to jot the answer to the question, what is the lesson the character learns in the story? So in box number 3, you're going to write, What is the lesson the character learns in the story? In that last box in square number 4, you're going to jot, what is the genre of this book and how do you know? What is the genre of this book and how do you know? Just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go. Great. I see one group ready to go. Good. Thanks, Mark. Harmony, are you set? All right, great. So now what you're going to do is carefully, if you have scissors, you can get scissors, but if you can tear, that's good. So now what I usually do is collect them. And what I want to do is look at all the answers from one question at once. And I'm going to organize them. So that's why I like the boxes, because it allows me to move it around easily. And I can do one question at a time. So what I want you to do is cut out or rip out box number 1. And that was a question about what kind of person is Henry and what makes you think that. So all you're going to have is a box with that answer on it. So now what you're going to do with your group is share your answers. And again, this isn't about right or wrong. This is about where students are at with their responses and how do I take them to the next level? What is it that they're doing in response? And what do I need to do to take them to the next level? So what I want you to do is read your responses to each other and just put them in order, kind of as simpler to more complex in a progression of the answers that different people recorded. And again, this is what I do with student work. It helps me to group and kind of think what are students doing, who's doing what, and where are next steps. So again, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes just to read the different responses in your group, and then put them in order from simpler responses to more complex, and be able to identify with your colleagues why, what is happening in the answer, and why did you put them where you put them, and what makes one response maybe further down on the line in complexity than the others. All right, so it's about 2:07. I'm going to pull you, oh, sorry, 3:07. I'll pull you back in about 5 minutes. All right, so let's come back together. You've had a little bit of an opportunity to have a short discussion just about the responses you got. Any noticings or thinking from anybody when you did that? Did you notice a difference in the responses that you got in your groups?
You can put it in the chat.
All right, so I'm gonna, if all right, so these are actually real responses that we got when we did this with a 4th grade class. And so they're ordered in kind of a progression. As you start at the top, in the top box on the left-hand side, you can see how the answers grow here. So starting out with Henry does lots of things. Henry does a lot of looking, so that's kind of a progression. It's more than things, it's looking, but it's still pretty much at the literal level. He lives in an old house that could use some paint because it is really gross, and he likes to read a book, and he rented the house for not so much money. So here the student is telling about Henry, but it's more of a retell in the things that are happening in the book. That we're told. So still pretty much at the literal level. He only has enough money to pay the rent. He doesn't care what other people say. He lives in an abandoned house. Again, pretty much just repeating some of the things that were heard in the story. As I move down to the left-hand side, Henry is brave and he is also stubborn because he will not do anything the people say. He moved into that house. So here you can begin to see character traits, brave and stubborn. And then again, there is a little bit of evidence to that. He will not do anything what people said. So backing it up a little bit of why he's stubborn. He is kind and does not care what other people think of him. Again, here you have a character trait with some evidence of why. And then we move to Henry does not really care about cleanliness. He really likes old houses. Also, he seems very old and just likes peace. He seems to like anything that is old as him. I think he's not really hearing that the neighbors are mad at him. Maybe he wants to keep the house the way nature made it. So there again, you move to more inferential thinking. You have some character trait here. And some thinking about, why he's doing what he's doing, why he's acting the way he's doing, what he's doing. And then we have the last one here. Henry seems to be old and a little crazy. Maybe he likes things messy and cluttered. Some people are like that. Henry seems to like to be alone and to do things his own way. Henry is not poor because he could pay the rent for the house. Henry is pretty much a healthy, easy-going, innocent old man. So again, there you have some character traits. You have some thinking about why he's acting the way he's doing, some inferential thinking. So here, again, when I begin to not think about if an answer is right or wrong, but what's going on, I can think about what the student needs next, because I'm not going to jump student number 1, who's down at Henry does a lot of things, to what the standard is more like is thinking about a character and giving evidence in a complex situation. So I'm not going to jump that student all the way up to this highest level, but maybe to thinking about a character trait and then backing it up. So again, as you do an assessment like that, think about what are the next steps. So how do I group kids for a strategy group? And then what's the next step, not moving them to the standard. Any thoughts or questions on that? So here I just put the standards up. So you have reading standard. This is the character standard, number 3, and I have it for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So again, you can see how it builds. 3rd grade is about character traits, motivations, and feelings, and explaining how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. So again, as you use these standards to kind of have where you want your students, and then coming up with benchmarks for them. So you have examples of student work to help demonstrate that. The next piece is, this is taken from the Lucy Calkins units. I really love these progressions. They have them for both narrative and informational reading in all different areas. But again, it really helps with the progression and understanding kind of what's that one next step, that micro step, micro progression versus a huge step for students. So I'm hoping that this assessment can help again in the comprehension area, thinking about I need to just get a quick glimpse again, a read aloud, a quick read aloud, a picture book. Even at the 5th grade, there's so many good picture books out there, can really help you get a glimpse in either at the start of your unit or at the end of the unit, or just to check in to see where students are at with their thinking in different areas. Again, that question that I had, the F&P questions, those can really help support the types of questions and the thinking that students need to do with the standards and at their level. Any thoughts or questions? You can put it in the chat or unmute. No? All right. So next time we'll be meeting again in March, on March 18th. And at that point, hopefully you'll have been able to try out some strategy groups. We'll spend some time talking about how that went. Go ahead and give a try on a read aloud assessment. Again, it can be any text that you are using that matches a unit that you're studying. And think about giving the assessment, putting the answers in a progression, and thinking about what's that next step that students need in that group that are answering similarly. All right, I think.
Yeah, and you might consider, thinking about doing a common read aloud assessment. That's just optional as a group or as a community. And you might consider thinking about one of the new mentor texts, just as a way of getting to know the new mentor texts that grade level teams have gotten this year. And you may consider focusing on one of the high priority standards that are on the curriculum maps for that trimester. That's up to your team. We'd love to get, I think actually, I also wanted to mention that before we meet in March on the 18th, Gayle has 3 coaching days, and the literacy group has been giving me feedback around planning for those. So we're hoping that we can get some time for Gayle for each grade level to model either a strategy group, a guided reading group, or a book group, and then have time with the community or grade level team to talk about the thinking that went into that model lesson, some of the decision-making thinking. So that's a next step. We'd love to just get a quick plus delta on today. What do you think was most helpful or an aha for you today on a Post-it? We're going old school, and then, or
in the chat.
Or you could do it. You could do it in the chat. That would be easier. Up to you. You can either do a Post-it or you can put it in the chat. And then just any feedback that you have for us, anything you'd like to see more of. Any feedback that you may have for us. So thanks so much, and I'll leave it on so you can go ahead, and I'll leave the Zoom going so you can go ahead and put feedback in the chat. And
In the
then if
door?
you put it in the post, if you put it on a Post-it, I will come around. I'll just double check and come around. And I shared the slides with you. If there are any resources that Gayle shared today that you would like that aren't linked in there, let me know and I'll make sure you get them, either electronically or hard copies.
And again, that read aloud assessment is explained in this
Oh, yeah.
book on pages, I think I wrote 45 through 51. So she uses the book Those Shoes. So that's one that you could try out also. And I will also share with Sarah just the questions that I asked for this book also. So you could use this book also, Old Henry. Thanks, everyone.